Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mayor Ralph Becker, and I have with me the Chair and Vice Chair of the Redevelopment Agency of Salt Lake City, some of our RDA staff and folks who work with the city, and a team of consultants. And I'm going to make some brief remarks, and then the council member, RDA Board Chair Stan Penfold, is going to speak, and then he's going to turn it over to the design team for a quick presentation. And I'll keep my remarks pretty brief. Appreciate, again, all of you being here. We're here today to talk about the Regent Street design. And I think all of you know, but just to put this in geographic context, Regent Street is a block is a street that's kind of intermittent going north-south in Salt Lake City between Main Street and State Street, and the block that we are looking at is the block between First South and Second South, so between City Creek Center and Gallivan Center. And it has a famous, or maybe more properly phrased, infamous history in Salt Lake City. And that history is part of its charm, and certainly part of what you're going to be seeing reflected in the design for its future. I think almost everyone, certainly here, knows that really from very early on in my administration, we've been focusing on activating the cultural core and quickly focused on what is now under construction, the Eccles Theater. And from the beginning of the time that we were working on the Eccles Theater and the complementary office tower that's under construction with it, we have been looking at Regent Street as a street with incredible potential. It's a street that is narrow by Salt Lake City standards. It's a street that connects two extremely active places in downtown Salt Lake, that is City Creek Center and Gallivan, and the Gallivan Center locations. And it's also a place with the development of the theater and the new office tower that gives us an opportunity to recreate a street that has this colorful history and rebuild it for today. And what you're going to see unveiled today is the design of that theater that I can tell you from the first time I started seeing early concepts of this design, began to realize the dreams that some people have had in downtown Salt Lake for a long time, but really for a street that I think will be an incredibly attractive place in downtown Salt Lake and for the whole region for people to come and enjoy downtown in new ways that we really haven't seen on a street before. And I'll leave the kind of excitement around that for our design team to show you. But we're really seeing, I think, with the work that has been done with the Eccles Theater, with Regent Street becoming a new face and entryway both into the new theater, but also opportunity up and down the street, that I think with the work that we've been initiating and that we'll see progress in the year or years to come, we're going to see Regent Street evolve into a place unlike anything else in downtown Salt Lake City that I think reflects really well on the city and opportunities for us economically and in terms of activity going forward. So with that, I want to turn some time over to the chair of the RDA, to Stan Penfold. Can I just move these over? Does that work for folks? That way Stan doesn't have to sit in my lap.
Yeah, that would be awkward. I'm really excited as the chair of the Redevelopment Agency of Salt Lake City to have this opportunity to introduce the design team and the work they've been doing on Regent Street. And as Mayor Becker suggested, this is a really amazing opportunity to activate a portion of downtown that I think will provide us leverage to work with what's going on at the Eccles Theater, what's happened at City Creek, and some of the pretty amazing activities that happen at the Gallivan Center. So this is a connector street, and the design team has been really conscious of the efforts that we've had as a city to provide connections through our core of downtown. And so one of the things that I'm incredibly excited about is the opportunity to bring a very high level of public art to this space. It is immediately adjacent to the new Eccles Theater. It is has a public space component, and it is going to be a very strong connector and a really active place downtown, not just when the theater is in operation, but also our hope and our goal is to have it active all through the day. So I'm just going to turn the time over to Jesse and the design team so they can go through this so that you can get a feel for what they're proposing. This is going to be presented at the Redevelopment Agency Board this afternoon. So this is the first time we've seen it, first time you've seen it, and we'll have questions, I think, after the presentation. Jesse.
So the Redevelopment Agency of Salt Lake City engaged a Salt Lake City-based team of designers, landscape architects, branding experts, architects and engineers to develop plans for the complete transformation of Regent Street on Block 70 in downtown Salt Lake City. I am Jesse Allen with GSBS Architects, and you will also hear from Brent Watts with Struck and Mark Morris with VODA Landscape and Planning. Our team has been working on an intense schedule since November, interviewing and collaborating with Salt Lake City staff and developers and the design team of the new Eccles Theater. We've also been interviewing and collaborating with individual property owners, stakeholders, and businesses on Block 70 to formulate all of the placemaking tools that include branding, urban design, retail strategy, and program management to bring a new vitality and energy to this integral place in downtown. The new Regent Street, as Stan and the mayor mentioned, will serve as a vital connector between City Creek and Gallivan Center. Included in this project are improvements to Orpheum Avenue, which goes from State Street to Regent, as well as a new mid-block pedestrian walkway that connects Main Street to Regent Street. With the added draw of the new Performing Arts Center, as well as the tools that we're putting in place, Regent Street is slated to become a new home for business, restaurants, arts, and gathering in Salt Lake City. So Brent will tell us more about.
Okay. So we have images that we're going to show. So the initiative that we had was to create a venue for gathering, as the mayor mentioned, a place to discover and a place to really connect the downtown public. It'll be unique, as the mayor mentioned. The history of this block is certainly one that we will love to tell the story. It'll be unexpected, the types of experiences will be on the street, and of course, with the Performing Arts Building, the opportunity to be storytelling and a theatrical element to this, the block will be one that we will highlight. So in the process of developing this, we wanted to create a street of stories. That's the campaign, the concept behind the brand of the street. And so the next slide will show you, as mentioned, the history of Regent Street is really one. First, we know of Brigham Young and his brothers were property owners on Regent Street. Salt Lake House was the hotel which housed the Pony Express when they came to the city. Some of the notable dignitaries and colorful people, Mark Twain came and visited in 1861 at the Salt Lake House, and of course, news. In the 1800s, the Tribune was there for 80 years, and then, of course, the Desert News that was on the street from 1997. So Regent Street has a lot of great stories, and because of the history of the authenticity of Regent, we feel that's a great way in which we'll design and develop elements that will make this a unique experience. The next slide, in the process of developing the branding for this experience, working with our design team, we created 5 guideposts. And these guideposts will essentially embed the opportunity to make it a gathering place. It'll be one where there'll be, as mentioned, unique art and design. Not unlike anywhere else in the country, we really would like to have unique pieces of art that make it iconic to the street. And of course, Regent was a place of great businesses that were here in downtown, and so the element of commerce will be an important part of the experience of our objectives. And then, as mentioned, the other guidepost is headline news, one that will use this element of storytelling because our strategy is a street of stories. That headline news is kind of will be woven into the design elements using typography and stories that will define the experience on the street. Of course, the last 2 is because the Performing Arts Building will be housed on the block, that we love the idea of street theater, where relevant stories, my story today, we'll walk to the street and they'll be using digital and other technology to make it an experience on Regent. And of last, because, as mentioned, the history of Regent, the importance of this multiculturalism, the diversity of the street. You had Plum Alley, which was housed hundreds of immigrants who came and had their businesses on Plum Alley. The theater that was on Plum Alley, and we love to weave in the element of multiculturalism into our designs. So those were the guideposts. From that, you'll see the next series of slides talk about conceptually, will be, the vision here is that it's a gathering place. It's a place where you'll want to be seen and to see, and using the lighting and using the elements of retail within the street. These concept sketches are referencing looking towards City Creek, as the mayor mentioned, the vibrancy of it being a mid-block crossing, and then using some of the large buildings as a place where we can put placemaking, designs and graphics, sculptures on the building faces to create another layer of storytelling on Regent. And of course, one of the great areas of Regent Street is the Plaza area, which is just south to the Performing Arts Building. We see this as a great opportunity to create a gathering area. We would like to commission an artist that would essentially sculpt a piece of art that would be in that center area of the plaza. This is just a concept sketch. But for you, it's something dynamic, large, and exciting that people want to come and essentially take their pictures in front of it, and an opportunity to let that become a place of gathering. Some of the other sketches are referencing embedding and looking at retail, an opportunity for the public to engage in retail on the different sides of the street. So when we started the assignment, the idea as a design team was, so where have we been, and where are we going to go? The story of then and now is an important part of this experience. And so we went and looked at the history of Main Street and what happened on Main Street and the businesses that were here. And you can see in the rich history of all of the signage and the retail that happened over the history of the street. And the types of businesses were there. And so we took that idea, and the next slide shows, so we created a logo, a word mark that will be used in all of our branding. And the definition here is it will be, you can see in the design of Regent, on Regent, is we've taken the element of printing press, the bending of the paper, and made it contemporary. So with the new design of the logo for Regent is designed with this very simplified treatment of type that will be used on our wayfinding signage that leads you into the mid-block crossings. And of course, lastly, the most important part about the engagement is that what retail will be. And we've analyzed some of the previous data, and we're identifying specific retailers that would be housed. We've had a lot of great and exciting conversations with business owners and potential business owners, an opportunity for them to want to come and engage with, to have their store on Regent. We see Regent as a unique opportunity for local artists, local entrepreneurs, and a place where they would want to have their retail store on Regent because of its authenticity and the beauty and the excitement of what would be happening on the street. I think that's right.
Swap.
Yeah.
Great. All right, my name is Mark Morris with VODA Landscape and Planning. I'm a landscape architect and urban designer that's been working on the design team. I'll run you through kind of the details of this street, and working with this design team has been really collaborative in trying to come up with some specific goals with creating a unique place in Salt Lake, that it will be a destination on its own, whether or not you're coming down for a performance or you're just here on your lunch break, making Regent Street a real destination on its own. And with the kind of details of streetscape, the goal overarching all of this was it needed to be very multifunctional. We need to be able to bring very large 18-wheeler trucks down this street to access the theater, but we also want to make it very oriented to pedestrians. So how do we make this function in a lot of different ways? So we've got a few details here, some cross sections. The top on the right is Regent Street itself, that we're basically designing what is called a shared street, that it wouldn't have a traditional curb and gutter, but it would be a street that would have all of the space basically available for pedestrians, that were the street to be closed off during an event or when there are large amounts of people, that the street itself becomes a public space that's easily used. For restaurants, if there are restaurants along the street, they can spill out into this space and really make it an interesting, vibrant street. So some of the details, again, going back to this idea of headline news, with the Regent block being the home of story and news for so long, we really like this concept of embedding all of these ideas into the actual infrastructure of the street. So as you'll see this on the top corner, we've got an old Salt Lake Tribune, and I really like the difference in texture and pattern that these different fonts and scale of print made on a page, and sort of took that and made it contemporary to design this very pixelated contemporary hardscape element that would, again, be a smooth surface that would make it very easy for this street to function in a lot of different ways. And of course, some of the elements bringing in some color and some green on the street. Throughout the UPAC process of gathering comments on this project, again and again, it was that Regent Street was a pretty harsh place as it stands today, and bringing in some elements of greenery and shade and some things that will make it a little bit more inviting. And the furnishings, looking through the details of it, really embedding in all of the details of the street, these concepts that Brent has mentioned, multiculturalism, headline news, having those in all of these elements, that they really begin to tell the story of Regent Street. Lighting, over and over again, the public comments were that they wanted the street to be a well-lit, safe-feeling place, and using those lighting elements to really create an interesting place to be, whether or not you're there at a big event, a concert, or there for a performance at the theater, or you're just there to have dinner, that it's an interesting place to be. The signage, working through some of the details of how the signage and wayfinding itself works, having, again, that sheet detail of the fold of the paper kind of embedded in all of these elements. So through all of this, we were looking for a way in which we could integrate the telling of stories in a way that was engaging, and again, coming back to that sense of discovery. We didn't want this to be a Regent Street museum, and we didn't want to just have a bunch of plaques up and down the street saying, here's what Regent Street used to be. We wanted it very much to be something that people could feel that every time they came to Regent Street, they were discovering something new, and perhaps learning a new story about Regent Street as they're creating their own new story on the street. So going back to the idea that the printing presses for the Tribune and the Deseret News were on this street for so many decades, we came back to this idea of a press sheet running through a printing press, and came up with this idea of having a kind of an artistic interpretation of that press sheet running down the street, that every time it folded, it could become a new story. We could again bring in those patterns of multiculturalism and the different cultures that were found on the street, and embedding really in this infrastructure some interesting stories. We found a great story of an older gentleman that was talking about in his childhood going down to Plum Alley and having the Chinese New Year. The old men there would hand out these red envelopes filled with money at the New Year, and that was his memory of what Plum Alley used to be. So really trying to kind of find these interesting stories of this place and the history of Salt Lake, and telling it to the people as they kind of venture down this street and learn new things about it. One of the interesting elements about this press sheet element is that it can become many things. Having it go up on surfaces of buildings, it can become elements that are built into murals, pieces of art, interactive, engaging elements that, again, we want people to feel that every time they come to Regent Street, they're discovering something new about the history of Salt Lake, that we really have a multi-layered and very interesting history. This block in particular we found was a cross-section of a lot of interesting elements in the history of Salt Lake. So we'll run through these pretty quickly, just some site plans of the street, kind of functionally how the street would work. Again, designing the street in such a way that auto traffic can still get through when it needs to the parking garages that are on the street, the truck traffic to the theater, but designing it in such a way that it would be very low speed and that people would feel very comfortable walking through this space. We're fortunate that across the street at City Creek Center, we have Regent Street that functions in a very similar way. That shared street concept is functioning really well there, and trying to bring that across the street to Regent was one of our main goals. And there at the bottom, a little bit of a perspective view looking south, the Eccles Theater on the right, and the Regent Garage there on the left. Kind of mid-block heading south towards 200 South, you'll see the large plaza behind the theater that is, again, a multifunctional plaza that at times it will be a loading yard for the theater itself. And when those trucks aren't there, designing it in such a way that restaurants surrounding that plaza can spill out onto this space. And there towards the south end, getting closer to 200 South, again, bringing in these elements that will make the street a place that's inviting and interesting. Orpheum Avenue is a little bit of a challenge. Orpheum connects Regent to State Street and will continue to function as a major auto access to the project. And the team is looking at ways in which we can use Orpheum as kind of an intro to Regent Street. If someone is coming in from State Street, what sort of welcome do they get? What sort of impression do we give as they're entering? And then lastly, it's been mentioned that mid-block connection between Main Street and Regent Street is a major part of improving the walkability of downtown. Having an added connector will, again, make a lot of this energy between Main Street and Regent Street really work together to create a great space. The mid-block connection itself is very narrow. It's only 24 feet wide, but we saw this as a really great opportunity to incorporate art. There are a lot of salvaged elements from the print building and the others that were demolished to make way for the theater, that we feel this would really be a great spot for those pieces to be showcased and really tell that story of the history of this place. So the last two images, we've got some nighttime renderings of, again, hopes and dreams of what Regent Street can become. This is looking south from City Creek Center behind you, looking through the block towards Gallivan Center. And again, it's winding these elements all together, creating a destination that people can come to on their lunch break, at night, really making it a destination at any hour of the day. And then the last image looking north from the plaza up Regent Street, the Regent parking garage there on the right and the Eccles Theater there on the left, creating a vibrant place that people really feel tells a different and a unique story of Salt Lake. Because this street is very different from so many Salt Lake streets, we really see this as a great opportunity to create something special.
Thank you. So that was your first, or maybe big opportunity to learn about design. And I can tell you for us, having watched this unfold, and I'm sure it's going to unfold as the redevelopment agency works on this with us, we're going to see it evolve further, and we'll certainly welcome a lot of public input, as the RDA board will, in further shaping Regent Street. With that, maybe we just open up for some questions. Excuse me. Any questions? So we're, I'd say we're still working on the cost elements of this in terms of what the final cost of the Regent Street redevelopment will be. I think we're anticipating it will be $10 million plus for the whole project. And that this is obviously going to be the work of the RDA board, but that, you know, as they look at financing, you'll recall that when we created the funding for the Eccles Theater, we set up a CDA, and it is Community Development Agency. It's like an RDA agency, right? Area, Community Development Area. So we took this block and are capturing some of the increment from this block, and with the development of the tower, we think that's going to give us the foundation for the funding of Regent Street, depending on the final design, final features, and other funding sources. I don't know if you want to add to that.
If you had everything go ideal, when do you think you might be able to start, and how long do you think it might take to finish the entire project?
Well, some of these are obviously left for the RDA board to consider and make decisions on, but our hope and really our expectation is that we would start construction this year and open concurrently with the opening mid-year next year of the theater.
So sometime, say mid-2015.
To 2016.
You would finish in 2016.
Correct.
Components of this have to be open for the theater because one of the unique features of this project is that the public space is partly the loading dock for the theater, for example. So some of those components are going to have to be orchestrated in concert with the theater construction and opening. Some other pieces of it might phase a little bit after that, but really our goal is to have this as a very usable and mostly finished space in conjunction with the opening of the theater. This proposal will be presented at the Redevelopment Agency meeting this afternoon. It'll be the first time we've seen it publicly. There'll be some discussion there. What we're hoping for is that the board, with some input, signs off on the direction. And if that goes as we expect, then detailed designs will follow. So this is concepts, sort of direction, some themes. The details will actually evolve into eventually working plans that will have many of these components incorporated. Another piece of this will be the public art component. And so there's some public art happening right now with the theater project, with the Eccles Theater, and that's working through our public art process with the Salt Lake City Arts Council. There'll be a very significant public art component to Regent Street as well, and so that will work through a similar process with the Salt Lake City Arts Council.
And there was talk about the street performers.
The piece of this that we haven't really gotten into the sort of details yet, because we're talking about infrastructure and space, is the programming. And so there will be another component of this space that is how do we program it for activity in the day, at night, how does this become interactive? A lot of that will have to do with retail spaces and restaurants and what's happening sort of on the side of the street, but there will need to be some programming for activities in the plaza, everything from concerts to movies to street performers. I mean, we haven't had those conversations yet.
How do you characterize this fitting into your vision of downtown area will be like, say, the next year or two?
So from the beginning of the time that I came into office, a primary objective is to take downtown as the gathering place for the region and look for ways that we, from the city side of things, can participate in that activation and have it be that true welcoming environment for people seeking all kinds of activities that they want to do that you can really only find in the downtown area. The Eccles Theater is obviously a major investment of the city. Regent Street would be a major investment of the city as well. But we see this as part of what we're doing in downtown Salt Lake as the cultural core for the whole region. So we've seen the reopening, for example, and redevelopment with the Capitol Theater just in the last few months that the city participated in with the county's lead, in that case with the Capitol Theater. This is a project with the Eccles Theater and Regent Street where the city has been the lead and the county has been a partner as well. And there's been major private sector participation and private sector actions that have happened concurrently. So, for example, with the Eccles Theater, we've got a new major tower development that is cantilevered over the theater as well and uses the airspace above the theater. So we see this as being really a key feature and a new kind of feature in terms of Regent Street and what it would do for downtown Salt Lake. We do not have today in downtown sort of the cute street, you know, where people go to enjoy the street scene. We see Regent Street as really holding that incredible potential with the anchors at both ends of the street, with the development of the theater, with the walkway connecting Regent Street to Main Street, and there'll actually be two walkways because there'll also be one going through between the theater and the new tower. That this, you know, again, is part of the activation and, you know, for people to live, work, and play, and that's what a downtown is supposed to provide.
Kind of like map without gambling, but like Frontier Street is in Vegas, and just kind of walk down and experience kind of what's going on.
Oh, gambling on every corner. Yeah.
Well, if we bring back the historic elements, then yeah, we probably should consider that.
No, you know, we've looked, and the design team has looked extensively at a lot of these really great streets around the country, and really even around the world, where they are, where they become destination spots. And we think Regent Street has that potential in downtown Salt Lake, both because of its location, but also with the things that are happening around Regent Street, and then turning Regent Street through this incredible design that is, you know, in many respects the starting point, but also provides a real clear direction for what Regent Street can become and should become.
Is there any incorporation of sustainability in this design? You can let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to talk about in terms of sustainability and how that?
We're using LED.
You can go to
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I'll slide over.
Shift over.
We're using LED light fixtures, or proposing LED light fixtures in this design, and we also have we're working on what size of a photovoltaic array this would take to produce the electricity required for the street, but that's currently still in design and being considered.
I might mention, some of you may know that in every project we've pursued as a theater, as a city, for the city as a project, public safety building, this theater, the airport, net zero is our goal. And so we're looking, obviously, in terms of energy efficiency, which we've been able to find incredible savings, both the public safety building and with the theater. And we're looking for the same thing on every project we do. But then we're looking to then make up the gap between what we achieve with energy savings and take advantage of renewable energy sources to fill that gap. So we're not very far along in that part of the discussion, certainly, but it's part of the city's goal on every project we do. Okay, thank you all.